So I'm really interested in the inspiration behind the cards, and I was hoping you could just start by talking a bit about that.
Yes, so maybe a little bit of a background. This work kind of evolved and grew up out of a practice of the past sort of 12 years, where I was developing, directing, and facilitating collaborative and participatory group compositions, particularly for large groups of musicians and non-musicians, also inviting people with or without any prior performance or music experience. And these pieces were performed without written instructions, and I was always part of the ensemble. This work met me at the point where I was considering I was reviewing the past 12 years and how to I guess pass some of these ideas on, and what would happen if I removed myself, how I could maybe put pen to paper, put down in writing some ideas and some insights that I've learned through throughout the 12 years and meeting and working with other people. And so I started to collect ideas and pieces and write them down. It was kind of a beginning of a process, and I was thinking at that point of maybe publishing a book. Like a collection of scores, or a manuscript or something. And these pieces included both text and graphic scores. And I was playing around with different possibilities, and some of them were longer, some of them were shorter. I was thinking about the feeling of these pieces and how much the idea of there are rules and instructions, but the point is actually to enable one to be free. So, and I kind of felt that a book was some kind of a constraining form. So the form just didn't feel right. And I was playing around with these ideas that I would like to keep those pieces individual, so then players could combine them, or maybe there'll be different sequences, and so keep it much more flexible and flowing, and enable it to be, I guess, more modular. And so thinking about those individual pages led me to think about cards. And from cards, it was a kind of a quick leap into this idea of tarot cards. And the other thing that evolved through this process was the title that came out, which was Etudes. And that was kind of relating to this, I suppose, tradition and practice of writing studies and short compositions, usually for individuals to practice new techniques, to develop new skills, to perfect skills, to go through ideas and push oneself. And so that seems very fitting. I like the idea of studies. I like the idea that I guess as a composer, I'm kind of planting seeds rather than telling someone. So the Etude stuck as a title, and then the tarot idea again connected to this notion of connecting. I mean, this is another thing that I was thinking at the time of the sort of the link between intention, attention, and action. What happens when we focus, but not too strenuously, because I wanted to still bring principles from those large group compositions, which one of them would definitely be staying playful and open, and allowing, kind of open to the moment, and allowing things to evolve and happen naturally. So I didn't want to confine, again, this idea of leaving things quite in flow, while at the same time enable a space to become quite deeply involved in something. So so the tarot again kept rising up coming up as a sort of a really interesting starting point to inform the way the deck will evolve. I knew I didn't want to create a tarot deck as such, but I was quite intrigued, and I am still intrigued by this idea of how you'd by intending and thinking about something, then you'll get a type of a response, and how that will connect, and what happens, and how that happens, and coincidences, and things like that. So that was sort of all in the pot at that point, where I was starting the New Voices and sort of residency, I guess. And and yeah, I knew I wanted to include principles, and the principles of the Etudes, again, quite early became strong. I mean, became quite important from the beginning, which was to keep the work holistic. So so whatever evolve, it will include sound and vision and mind and body, touch. I really wanted it to be something that is sensuous, so the inspiration comes from the practice itself. So the pieces actually are happening or evolve through the engagement. So they're not like so there are no pre-ideas. There's a seed, and then the way someone actually respond kind of inform the piece, and each one is unique. So things like that. So holistic, playful, focusing not on content but form. So finding the right form, and that's relating again to the card. I think it's a really good form to allow people to develop a personal and independent piece of themselves. So I'm kind of, in a way, presenting the means, but the meaning itself is being given by the players.
Yeah, I think play is really important. I think it's really interesting how you chose cards as the form, and I know tarot was a big influence, but also cards are a game, and there's a sense of play in that. And it's interesting, that relationship between you deciding not to use a book, even though you've called it Etudes and it's study and you think of books, but you want to encourage that sense of play. And I think it's really interesting, all those small relationships between all your different inspirations. And I think it's really impressive how you brought them together into one object. Is maybe now a good time to show the cards?
So people might have seen these. So this is the box. So I followed the principles of the cards of the tarot, which have a major arcana, which is basically the cards which are representative of the archetypes. So there's 21 archetypes. The first one is the Fool. And I was thinking about, and the full journey through the major arcana or through the archetypes, it starts as a novice, as someone who has no experience, even though I don't really believe, I believe we all have an experience to share. And so it starts as the naive, starting the journey, the unknown, stepping into the unknown, but it also represents the full is card 22. So the first card is 0, which is an interesting number in itself, but then it ends as number 22, which is the same Fool when it ended the journey. So after meeting all these different archetypes and experience all this, multiplicity, really experiences, and quite a deep and internal and external journey through different experiences, then comes back. So it's the same and not the same. And I was thinking about that, and I definitely knew from the beginning, and before I even thought about the idea of the tarot, which dictated that there will be only 78 cards in the deck. Because actually, while I developed it, it actually became quite clear that there could be definitely more cards. But I decided to keep this edition for 78 cards. And I knew that I wanted to have each, what usually on the tarot you have or on playing cards, you have the backs are always the same. And I actually wanted each one to be different, because again, I wanted even people, I knew there'll be text, but I wanted even people without knowing English or being able to read to still be able to resonate with the deck. So each color is unique, but as there are different families, I decided that the major arcana will be on the shades of purple, which is connected to spirituality, and then the minor arcana, which is also relating to the four suits of the playing cards, which is how the tarot evolves. In the 15th century, they used to use it just with normal playing cards. So there are four families in the tarot. There are the rods, the swords, the pentacles or the coins, and the cups. Each one relates to different elements. So there's the water, the fire, the air, and the earth. And each one has its own color. So I was, so I kind of chose those colors. And then so you have the purples, the blues, the green, the yellows, and the reds. And then I also knew that I wanted to include the white and the black. And the black was definitely part of the archetypes. There's a card called Death, which doesn't necessarily signify ending. It's ending and beginning. So it's like it should be looked all as a circular thing. So, but it's also as black. Black retains all the color, does not project light. So it keeps all, if you want, keeps all the colors. And then I was thinking about the Fool. The Fool is really important in the deck. And I also thought it's kind of represent the player in this, our players. And I thought, okay, it's the first thing. I want it to be naive but also wise, and and then I thought of the white, and the white sort of project, also has all the colors, but then it projects, all the light is projected back. So that was quite easy to make that decision with the cards. And then I went into the text, and then I'm just going to open the first one, which is the Fool, which is a leap of faith. And what happened to my initial compositions, which were kind of text and graphic scores, some of them were longer, and suddenly I had a card, and I was kind of putting them around, and suddenly they became a lot and too much text, and it was just didn't feel right, a bit like the book idea. And so I thought, okay, what do I do? And then I started stripping down. The graphic scores didn't work. It didn't look right. And then I thought, okay, so that doesn't work. I still have the color. So it became more and more stripped down until it became really, really minimal. And then connected to this idea of removing myself and my aesthetics and ideas out of the deck, I decided to just go into and pick up phrases and idioms from English which related to sound, movement, time, texture. Just started collecting different phrases, and there are hundreds. Step right in, step right back. Shake it all up, played by ear. And I wanted bits of body and a variety. I was very, very wide to start with. And another thing which was really important in the card is the idea of how do you put movement without telling people, okay, now it's like be playful, or go make a move, or shake your elbows or do something. I didn't want to do that. So I just thought this is wonderful with the shuffling, because as soon as you shuffle, that's already inherent to the form. I don't have to say it, it's just something people will be used to, and playing around and messing and all this thing. Immediately your hands are moving and your mind is connected to the hands, and all that thing just became, wow, that's wonderful. So this stayed in definitely. And then the different families had different colors, and I also wanted to have each one of them to be quite distinct from one another. So even though it was stripped down the text, I wanted each one to be quite specific. So the major arcana were all the archetypes. I did connect some of the, I actually, just before that, I have to say that as English is not my first language, I had to run these phrases by some English speaking, speakers, because the way I perceive, I realized that was another interesting insight, that the way I read language or I understood some of these phrases for others who came from using it or maybe hearing it at school, because some of them were a little bit archaic. And, so I got about 5 or 6 people to run through some of these ideas, and I had a chat with them and seeing what was their response to different ones, and was that something that was inspiring. I wanted things to inspire. I didn't want things to kind of make people feel, I don't know, sort of constrained or held back, or I didn't want a negative response. I wanted an open, something that opens you up, that triggers you in that sort of way. Mm-hmm. So after talking to all these people, I kind of again stripped down the ones that felt worked the best with people, and ones that I liked, and a few of my own pieces that there were really stripped down. So, for example, there's one card which is called The Silent Scream. And The Silent Scream was just a title of a piece, which just, the instruction is not that long, but it says, scream as loud as possible without making any sound. But even that was just too long. And I was like playing around and it didn't fit. And I thought, I'll just leave it as a silent scream. And this idea of, and each time you scream, it can be something else. And that again suggested a movement and a psychological thing. And I don't know. It's just, so everything got quite stripped. Yeah. So the archetypes were just presented as the archetypes. So different phrases. And for this one, I did choose some of the phrases that I felt like a leap of faith for the fall seemed right as a first start for something like that. Mm-hmm. So this is really where my connections are. But I wanted for sure everything else not to be. I wanted it to be not connected with the color. So I didn't want the text particularly to be connected with a particular color, even though they are bound. Of course, once you're on a card, you're bound forever as this specific interaction. But I wanted, so I used chance operations for that. I had all the ones that I wanted, and I knew the families, and then by chance I connected those, which goes to which color, and then which card goes with which, sort of particular. So the major arcana is this. And these are just the archetypes. They're fairly similar. The second one is a bit more graphic. So while I did away with, so these are the blues, and while I did away with the pure graphic, and I had some ideas for collage, and each one of these suggests the text is slightly, graphically presented. And again, some of them have multiple choices, and again, it's plain, and it's a suggestion. The way I see it, you don't have to actually play all of them. And I was quite interested how people will respond to these. So there's some of them where you have a word in the middle and then shoots. Some of them are, where is it? A bit more graphic in a way. And there's another one, for example, the time stretch. And there's another one that I like. I think it kind of got mixed here. So push to the limit. The other one is one that can be read. So this is the horizontal ones. So these are coming horizontals, and some of them are also doubles. So there's so as deep as your breath, as long as your arm. So these are kind of running horizontal.
It's really great to hear a bit more about how you came about the compositional practice, because I think on first response from just receiving the cards, they're just beautiful objects, and the colors themselves are really engaging, and that's enough in itself just to jump in. But it's really interesting to hear a bit more about the relationship to the tarot and how you use that to recreate the compositional process.
And I think by this stage I've already kind of shifted. I knew that I wanted each of the families to be slightly different. So the yellows have 2 So, there's two, and some of them are kind of contradictory. And again, these are kind of opposites. So that's what you do with the yellows have this, and the reds already have. This is the only one where there's some color involved, inserted in the text. So, and I did a version of, and that's kind of the most colorful ones, which is vowels and consonants. So,
and it's interesting because you don't give a whole lot of that information within the cards, do you? You keep a lot of that yourself. Will people be able to find out about that elsewhere if they want to, or is that just something that's
I don't
personal
know.
to you?
What do you think? I don't know. I kind of like this idea of being removed, at least initially. And I mean, obviously, people are hearing now, and that might be shared. But yeah, I wonder if it's important. I'm interested in the resonance. So, for example, people don't necessarily know that it came from tarot. They don't necessarily know about the different families or the orientation initially, or the intention, or I'm saying in the instruction because I do want people to use it in a way where they focus. And at the moment it seems like people get so excited by the color they just want to play all of it, but I'm quite seeing it also as giving time to individual cards and really thinking about it, and maybe as you shuffle you can focus on a question. And this is another thing that came as it was developed. I personally did not think about it as using it as tarot, but as there were some problems brewing towards the later part of the work, I thought I'll just do it, and then it became quite uncanny. I was like, how did that come?
Maybe it's something to ask the people at this
Yeah,
event.
yeah. So I was kind of shuffling, just saying, "Oh, what should I do? Will that happen? And how to approach this?" And then it will come up with some kind of that. Obviously, it's just those phrases that they were in any not meant as sort of be the oracle in that sort of way, and suddenly they really fit. There's
Your
like.
your intention's always been to allow the maximum possibilities, so people are free to do what they like with them, right?
Definitely, yes. So
Maybe now is a good time to
to introduce, yes. So in the spirit of trying not to be too much of me, I send some of these people who were so helpful in helping me with the text, and and were part of the development of the work, and were quite curious. I thought, okay, that would be good, and I send them the deck as I got it, and asked them to respond in any way if they wanted. So I got a few of these backs, and I will be inserting them in this among our chat. And the first one is from Angharad Davies and Team Parkinson.
I just wanted to ask a little bit more about your work, because your work often explores composition as a shared resource. And I just wanted to know a little bit more by what you mean by this, and whether the cards has developed your thinking in this area at all.
So, firstly, yes, and I'll get to the card in a minute. Just to say that it's a really important principle for me, or fundamental idea, that knowledge is a kind of commons, to be used as a shared resource. And the intention to create the card was as a resource for others, also for myself, but as something that I give out, and then somehow developed its own presence and life in the world, in connection to whoever comes across it, and sort of independent relationship for me and my intentions, I guess. Um, and yeah, this idea again of planting seeds. So the idea of composition, rather than an architect or top down, rather as a more like a garden. It's things shooting up from underneath. The seeds grow, so you plant, and then it's up to the people in different places. And the decks have already started to travel around the world, going to America and Ireland and all places in the UK, and now I think one is going to Norway and Germany. So again, interacting with different cultures. So I'm quite curious about that. In regarding to the cards, for me, it's at this point still a question which is now out in the world. And I'm really curious about the meaning and the purpose of this work, and what significance it will take over time, and how will people, and I think that will be a result of how people interact, and yeah, and process of time, experimentation, word of mouth, who knows. So in that sense, it's different, because a lot of my work is very in the moment, definitely my live performances, and the audience is there. So it's a very immediate reaction. Someone might get up and walk out, not often, but but that could trigger something. Someone cough, and you use that. So suddenly there's a disconnection between that. So it's interesting. It is another way to maybe question and explore these ideas that are inherent to these large group compositions. So how do we make music together? Because I see it as this collaborative piece. So even though I'm not there, I've set out something, and then a person picks up and respond already. So there's this collaborative aspect of it is very much there, and that's a very important thing for me generally in how I relate to the world and to others, whether it's for improvisation where I play with other people, or on my own in relation to the space. It's a relational piece. It relates the inner and the outer, the world within and the world out, and then us with others and the space. So yeah, so who knows?
Yeah, I mean, that was basically my next question, was the fact that your work is performance based, and you're now working with an object, and that's quite a different format. But it was interesting just hearing you talk, and it's almost like the performance is also you just still sending the cards out to different countries. That in itself feels like part of the performance. Do you find, are you struggling, or has it been a challenge at all to move to that working with objects? How have you put boundaries around it? Have you put boundaries around it?
Yeah, so I just have to say that I am a cross-disciplinary artist, and I have worked with objects like 3D, creating some sculptures, as well as performance recordings, drawings, painting. So it's a variety, collage. So it's, I guess, mixed media. But this object is the most, it brings together the most elements, I think, from all my other work. It somehow managed to fuse together sound and visual and performance and intention and maybe potential as well, unknown things. It's like it kind of contains already all the possible performances and responses that people will ever do. Who knows? I mean, tarot been lasting here forever. Who knows? Maybe when I'm not here, it will still resonate. So it's really interesting. It's a bit like throwing something in a pond and seeing the ripples, and who knows where, you know, I don't know, maybe also the flapping wings of the butterfly is a nice idea as well too. Yeah.
That's
So
a good place to introduce another example.
okay, so I have to say specific, very, very, I mean, amongst everyone that was helping, Steve Beresford has been my champion and supporter for many, many, many years, from originally when I stepped into the free improvising and not having a lot of confidence. He was very generous, and we started collaborating musically and, you know, in performance and throughout for, I don't know, for the past 25, maybe nearly 30 years, we've been kind of overlapping and doing things together, and he's been supporting me in so many different ways. So I have to say thank you, Steve Beresford. You are wonderful. And Steve was the first person that actually got the decks and immediately responded and made like this fantastic short piece with his piano, and it, for me, sounded a bit like to us, it sounded a bit like a chick trying to desperately to hatch out of the eggs, and it ends with it hatching. And I thought this is a wonderful piece to get as the first response. So so that would be Steve Beresford and another collaborator, again musical collaborator as well as wonderful supporter for this project, Guy Harris, performing his own take on one of the Etudes.
Yeah, so it's been really nice seeing all of these different ways of using the card. But I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about what you hope just anyone might experience through using your cards.
So I hesitate here because I again, I'd like to remove myself and my own limited perspective, because I'm finding out as I'm starting to get ripples, slightly little drops of responses coming back, that the way people respond to the work is so much wider and more interesting than my own possible, I don't know what projections, you know. So I think I'm in a place where I just like it to, it's again, send it out. It's a bit like a baby. It really was like 9 months. So I'm sort of thinking, okay, it's now out in the world to find its own place and to grow and to ripple. And I'm curious about what we talked about, not mentioning certain things, but to me, I know where it came from. So how will certain resonances infiltrate or, you know, influence some of the outcome? Um, so, yeah, I think I'll just, I'm just very at the point of just being very curious, and I'm sure I'm quite excited about the potential of this, and I'm sure I'll be surprised actually. And I guess the main thing will just be for people to really approach it in many ways, to try different things each time you come, to meet it in a different way, to really develop a personal way of working with it. Idiosyncratic, make it your own. I mean, they say that about the tarot, that people make their own decks, but in this even more, because it's like your interpretations and how you work with it. You can play it alone or with others. I would suggest that people just, if they're so inclined, then try as many possibilities as possible and see what works and what, I don't know, and what's the purpose of it in their own life. Some might want to use it for inspiration, some might want to consult, some might want to use it as a way to create new pieces, some would use it as a way to bring, I don't know, to practice other pieces in different ways. It's yeah, it's quite interesting to me
And
at this
it's
point.
not fixed to music, is it? You can use it across disciplines and even outside the arts. I suppose you could find use it for.
Yeah, I think so. If you leave it open, then people will find their own ways and different approaches and what's needed. And I think that's the main key at this point, to allow people to sort of to give people permission to just make it, you know. So there's a few rules, but the rules are in order to allow you the freedom to, you know, to go further. So this is Chaz the Sweet, and again, it's the first time he's engaged with the cards. So video was slightly longer. I'm keeping it a little bit shorter than what it was, but yeah, another point of view of engaging with Etudes.
And you just say you've been obviously developing this over a long period, and you have been on the New Voices program, developing this over the last 18 months, which I've had the pleasure of working with you on, which I would have introduced at the beginning of this event. But it would be nice to hear from you just a little bit more about your experience of being on New Voices, and what that journey's been like for you.
So it's been both challenging and very exciting. Excitement I talked about, and also nourishing, I should say. It was, I mean, the timing was kind of quite auspicious, actually, in a funny way, because it allowed me, you know, developing really parallel to the pandemic and the whole COVID and three lockdowns, and it sort of gave me permission to go inwards and to isolate and to, you know, there was definitely the first lockdown, everything became still, and you know, I could just sit quietly and think. And consider and research and develop this thing without disturbance, and at the same time also it was really good to focus on something positive. So it took a lot of the I guess a lot of the tension and the stress initially. This kind of came afterwards. I mean, making this the first time I've worked with printers, working with printers online, not being able to be hands-on, all kind of issues and, you know, stresses on their business as well, I guess. So that was difficult. And again, it's a new product, a new object, and so yeah, that was kind of a lot of learning. There is a learning process, and there's some you know, so that was a time, and again, other issues regarding the COVID situation and my parents being abroad and all sort of issues with that, and being locked down over time, kind of becoming more and more stressful. But talking to you on a regular basis, just being able to run ideas with someone and to that was really wonderful. Some of the mentoring that I've received through Sound and Music was extremely helpful. Um, I think also I found talking to you that, because that was quite a regular process, that there'll be periods when you know, I don't know, we were scheduled a talk, and I would feel quite negative actually, and I was stuck in something or I had some issues, and then I start talking to you, and because I was reflecting back, maybe a week back or slightly more, suddenly I realized that I discovered there's a lot happened, and I was excited actually, and so that was a really good process to realize that it's not so down to the points, but there's a kind of realize the process, be much more embedded within the process, which was great, and I'm grateful for that. That was really, really helpful, specifically during this year. I think it really, this support, I mean, generally working on your own as a creative person is really difficult. And there are many, at least to me, there are always questions and doubts and considerations. And so having the back, having, you know, having some kind of feeling that you know, there's someone there having my back, was, yeah, as well as my other champions, you know, and angels that were really there supporting me in other ways. So yeah, thank you. It was fantastic in that way.
No, it's been a pleasure.
So in my left hand, by choice, by chance, out, answer the call. In my hair, back in, turn away, turn around, dun, 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 dun. In my heart, ending and beginning, ending and beginning. In my left, feet, they change, it's coming, change is moving, change starts again. So in my right leg, sound your voices as you exhale. Sound your voice as you inhale. And the final recommendation is mix, 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 mix. Final recommendation is turn, 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 run through, run the risk, run its course, run through, run the risk, run its course, run the risk, run through.